Hello, this is Ellie Granger. The new Joan Thomas podcast, A Closer Look, is fast becoming a digital favorite across Georgia and beyond. And this week's conversation reaches right down to the roots of who we are. Today, Joan welcomes John Gassett to 360 News. John serves as Research Station Superintendent for the University of Georgia's Griffin campus, and he brings an expert's eye to a subject that touches every family, every table, and every community: agriculture. Joan talks with John about the essence of our survival, the land, the farms, the people who grow what we need, and the growing distance between modern society and the agricultural life that still sustains us. Among other topics, Joan asks, are we becoming disconnected from agriculture? What happens to communities when farms disappear? And should younger generations learn more about farming, not as something old-fashioned, but as something essential to their future? Join Joan Thomas for this week's A Closer Look, where the conversation reminds us that farming is not just about fields and crops. It is about food, community, stewardship, survival, and the future we leave behind.
Welcome back to A Closer Look. Today I'm sitting with John Gassett, local farmer and superintendent for the University of Georgia Agricultural Department, and I'm going to let John tell you exactly what that involves.
Hey everybody. What that entails is I'm the superintendent of the University of Georgia Griffin campus research station. And the department I'm in is called Field Research Services. So we're there to provide a service for researchers and technicians, whether it be through land preparation, soil sampling, fertilization, irrigation, anything that we can do to assist the researcher on their end for research purposes. I worked at the University of Georgia almost 20 years now, worked my way up through the ranks. Was a superintendent of the Iron Horse Farm near Athens. It was actually between Greensboro and Watkinsville, and was transferred back to Griffin back in 2001, I believe. Ever since, we just work with the researchers, try to assist them and try to help them have the best research they can.
Well, most people see food in the grocery store, but very few truly see the people, the sacrifice, uncertainty, and hard work behind it. Today, I'd really like for us to understand how farming is not really just a job, but it's a way of life. Can you tell us a little bit about the farmer's life?
I don't think farming is really that different from any other career. When you look at careers, I would say it's pretty much a life or a way of life for most people. On the farm, most of us who do farm, we live on farms, and it's not 8 to 5, it's not 40 hours a week. For the most part, as far as the small farm is concerned, we have day jobs, we have a career, and then we come home, work on our own personal farms, either in the evenings or weekends or both. So there's a lot of blood, sweat, and tears put into agriculture and farming, especially on the small scale side.
Well, you said you've been farming all of your life, and I don't think your brothers are both farmers. Is that correct?
They do have their own farm, so to speak. They're farming either with the help of my dad or relatives of the family, but yes, they do farm, mostly cattle. They do some hay on the side. I guess I'm the only one that's really involved in any kind of row crops.
Mm-hmm. I guess that's what I meant. What first made you realize you were going to be a farmer for life, or did you?
Well, I didn't at first. I actually went off to Athens, went locally here to Gordon for 2 years and transferred up to Athens for forestry school, and wanted to be a forester. Saw a lot of people locally that were foresters, seemed like they did well. And then in the early 2000s, warehouses sold out here in the southeast, and I built houses for a little while, and then finally an opportunity came up at the University of Georgia. Back then it was called the Experiment Station. And I started off with the statewide variety testing program as a technician, and it's kind of just ballooned from there. Have always been interested in gardening, have always wanted to farm, just didn't know if I could make a living at it.
Before I ask you your next question, I'd like to tell you a little story. I was privileged enough to grow up on a farm every summer of my life until I went away to college. And this leads into my next question for you. One day I was in my grandmother's house and I looked outside, and my little cousin, who might have been 7 years old, got in the truck, sat on his leg, cranked it up, and drove down the way. I thought he was going to get in trouble. And I remember saying, Harold's driving the truck. I didn't know what to do. And they went, oh, yeah, he drives. But you told me that was normal for a young farmer. How old were you when you started working like that?
And it's kind of a funny story. I'm sure our mom was scared to death, but our dad actually put us on a little 2000 Ford, started it off, eased off the clutch, got us mowing, he stepped off, we'd reach up and pull the throttle. So we started farming and running operating equipment when we were 7 years old. Um, as far as trucks and trailers, I'm sure it wasn't too much longer after that. As soon as we could reach the pedals, we were probably pulling trailers, loading cows, hay, whatever you could imagine.
And that's just the way it was, right?
That's the way it was.
Well, most of us would be very surprised to learn all the things that a farmer has to know and the skills a farmer has to possess in order to be successful. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
That's actually a great question. You know, growing up and just thinking about certain things and talking to different people, it's hard for any one person to know everything. As a matter of fact, it's impossible. That's why you try to do your best to surround your people with who are like-minded, who share similar interests, who are great at different things. For the most part, for a farmer to be successful, they're not going to be able to afford to pay mechanics, electricians, fertilizer bills, and all the things that go along with it. So for a farmer to be successful, they need to be an entomologist, a pathologist, a mechanic, a welder, an electrician. If you have new equipment now, a computer specialist, um, an agronomist, seedsman, seedswoman. Um, there's just so much to farming that you need to be well-rounded and have a great understanding to be successful. I think one of the biggest things you need to be is humble, because nobody's perfect. We all make mistakes. You're going to have times where you're not going to be successful. Those are the times people want to throw in the towel, and the best thing to do is just learn from it. Hopefully you have enough money to continue and do better on the next crop or next season.
Well, I know it's physically exhausting much of the time, but is it also, like you were just talking about, emotionally exhausting sometimes?
Uh, I think most people, humanity per se, are going to have worries.
Hmm.
For a farmer, most of us are going to try to think, 60, 90 days ahead. We're trying to think about our next crop. We're trying to think about equipment that needs repaired or maintained, um, herbicide sprays, pesticide sprays, um, looking and trying to find and research what the next best variety we need to plant. The statewide variety testing program at UGA has, on the computers now, they used to do print, but you can find it on the computer, where they actually do statistical analysis of different varieties of crops, from corn, peanuts, soybeans, cotton, all your major row crops here in Georgia, so that you can find a variety or a hybrid that work best for you in your area. Yeah, they may not be right on top of you, but you can look and kind of see across the state. That's the amazing thing about Georgia. There's so many different microclimates and soil types that you can generally find something that's similar to your area, and to be able to make the best decision you can in planting and managing.
So the weather controls a lot of your life, or is that a stressor, or is that good?
Well, I can't speak for everybody. I look at it this way. I tend to try not to complain, because I feel like if I complain, it can always be worse.
Right.
We just come off, had some rain. Certain areas, I think they got anywhere from 3 to 6 to maybe 9 inches. That's a lot of rain in a short period. A lot of fields probably have washing. Some people may have not gotten planted on time, may have missed their planting window, or they even could be on the back side of the planting window. For the most part, what I try to do is just take it as it comes. There's always going to be a tomorrow. The sun's going to come up. It's going to dry out. Certain farmers look at it different ways. Some people look at it as 30-minute soils. Plains is very much a 30-minute soil. You have 30 minutes of perfect conditions, and then it's either too wet or too dry.
I didn't know that. I never thought of that. Do you think that farming today is harder than it was in previous generations, or is it about the same? And if it is harder, has made the difference?
I don't think it's so much harder because I don't know anybody that wants to go back and plow with a mule. I've always wanted to try it, but the problem with the mule is it's got a brain between its ears, and if it wants to eat, it's going to eat. And if it's going to take off across the field, it'll take off across the field. I think we just have different challenges in different ways. I think we still combat soil health. You know, it's just like the people who settled this area. You know, they fought some of the same conditions. When you plant and you take off, you got to find a way to put nutrients back. If you don't have a way to put those nutrients back, you're not going to produce what you used to produce. You can go back and look at some of the data. We have increased yields, not necessarily farmers alone, but people who do the research, the plant breeders, have increased yields since the 1900s dramatically. And that was part of the goal. You know, the good Lord He doesn't make any more land, so we have to do more with what we have. And so increasing yields with varieties and nutrient levels, fertilizers and whatnot, has helped us as humanity to be able to produce more on less land. So, no, I don't believe we had it. We don't have it as hard as people in the past, but we have different challenges now with electronics and GPS and the EPA and whoever else. You can come up with some way or some reason for you not to spray something or plow something or whatever the case may be.
Yeah, I was wondering about pesticides. You have to regularly use some form, is that correct?
Well, that's kind of a tricky question. So even with the university, they have certain places where they'll have research trials with organic vegetables or organic fruits. The issue with organic is how many people plant a garden? How many people are going to go out there, just take an acre or a half acre, for instance? A half acre is a lot of work to manage and to keep weed free. Now, you can go out there with your garden tools and you can hoe every day, but what do most people want to do when they get home from work? They're tired, they want to go relax. The last thing they want to go out there and sweat, till dark. So between universities and the private industries, there are standards and policies and things set up, one, to keep us protected, two, to protect our environment. And there's rules and guidelines for us to follow. Work with the University of Georgia and the College of Ag. We have to have a commercial pesticide license. We have to maintain it. And what that says is, it doesn't give us a law to spray whatever we want, but what it says is we are able to read and understand and adhere to the label. Now, I hear a lot of buzz about glyphosate and Roundup and how it's in our food. And personally, I don't know how that's the case. We're not spraying crops that have, if you go spray your vegetables, guess what? You're going to kill them. You're not going to have any vegetables. You go spray some of the fruit trees, you're not going to have any fruit Roundup. It has to be glyphosate tolerant. And once it gets fruit on it, well, let's just start before that. Once it gets flowers on it, it's highly susceptible, even if it is resistant to glyphosate. You can do damage, you can lose yield. We're not out there spraying every day, because there's a limit, there's a cap on how much you can apply, and it costs money. We don't get pesticides for free. We don't get diesel fuel for free. So every trip across that field costs you money. And if your costs are high, our prices are set at a certain rate, whether we take corn to the market, soybeans, beef cattle, it's all the same. The farmer we don't set our prices. We're at the mercy of the market. And that can get kind of complex because a lot of crops with soybeans and corn depends on what Brazil does. So right now, Brazil's in the winter. They've already just come off of their harvest. So depending on who they sold to in the world is going to dictate how much we can get for ours and how much we can sell in the United States. So yes, we do spray, but we're mindful. We're not going to be spraying around waterways to get it in streams and rivers and creeks or lakes. Uh, and we use a certain rate. Just for instance, glyphosate. If we have a Roundup Ready soybean or Roundup Ready corn, we put a quart per acre. That's 32 ounces spread across an acre. An acre is 43,560 square feet, basically the size of a football field. So anybody wants to take a quart jar of water and do your best to spread it across the football field evenly. That's how much we're applying. And the majority of the time, we're only putting that out once a season, once per crop. If you look at the label, most of these pesticide labels, herbicide labels, you're spraying between 1 and 3 inches. Now, how many people have gone to Home Depot and gotten the generic glyphosate already mixed up, and you've got a dandelion that's 6, 8 inches tall, and you're just spraying? We don't do that in agriculture. We put it on a tractor, we go a certain speed, and we spray a certain rate. Spraying constantly on something like that is wasteful. You're wasting chemical, you're wasting money, and you're wasting time. The general public don't understand that.
Mm-hmm. Well, that was something I was about to ask you, but you've said it so well. That was one of the things I was going to say. What else do you wish that the average person understood about where their food comes from? I didn't know all of that.
So the interesting thing to me, if you look at the United States, and I tend to stick close to home in Georgia. So a lot of our vegetables and fruits are grown anywhere from Florida to the middle of Georgia. Of course, we have apples up in North Georgia. And we have specific pests that attack those fruits and vegetables. And we have certain times of the year that those things are attacked and certain conditions. If you have, this year I think it's supposed to be El Nino, if we have wet, cloudy conditions, we're going to have a tendency to have more disease and have more molds and whatnot. If it's hot and dry, we usually have a more tendency or more pressure from insects. So the more you do this, or like I said, I've been doing it with the University of Georgia for almost 20 years. You can kind of see a pattern, and you can kind of expect certain things to kind of watch out for. And that's one of the other things that's on people's mind, or farmers' mind, is depending on how the year sets up, what can we do to minimize the impact? There's nothing that cures it all. There's nothing that's going to protect it 100%. But we can be proactive and try to minimize the negative impact from what we have. As far as fruits and vegetables across the world, in the United States, just me personally, I feel like we're regulated to death in agriculture. I mean, there's a ton of things we cannot do legally. And if we do them, we're held liable legally by federal law. But just say you get tomatoes or apples or something imported from another country, the United States doesn't have, we have no regulatory response for anybody. We have no legal action we can take against other countries. They can use whatever chemicals they want to.
Mm-hmm.
So in my mind, if people are so concerned about what's grown here locally and at home, and they're so concerned about washing them with this, that, and the other, they really need to think about that as well with what's imported into the country. And you look at Mexico right across the border, we have no regulatory control of what they do.
How much is imported, or do you know what percentage?
I think it depends. So it's actually a good question, and I'm not exactly sure, but I think it depends on how well of a year we have across the United States on what we have or what we can grow. Peach growers and blueberry growers this year, we're probably going to be down some because of the heavy freeze we had in the spring. Mm-hmm. If it turns off cold and there's no way to protect the blooms, the blooms will freeze and you're not going to have fruit. So it's really hard for me to say what, I guess the supply and demand thing, how much supply we're going to have here in the United States uh, versus whatever's combating us, whether it be the weather or insects or disease or who knows, it might even be people.
Mm-hmm.
But that would be a good thing to research and find out.
Right. Just curious about that. So, why is it important for us to support the local farmers?
It's no different from any other industry. You know, if you purchase here at home and you can develop a relationship with the farmers, folks, we're not here to put stuff on our vegetables or fruits to hurt anybody. We're going to eat the same thing we're growing, the same thing we're selling. There's nothing special. We don't have a special little area that we're growing stuff just for our family. It doesn't work that way. Uh, you know, when we set up a garden or we set up a field, and especially with vegetables and row crops, we're going to tend to rotate those from year to year. So we don't develop an instance where we have disease, soil insects, or a situation that we won't be successful. So to the average person, no, we don't. We tend not to. We try not to. We don't grow soybeans behind soybeans behind soybeans or corn. We rotate those crops so that we can minimize the negative impact or negative implications that come from that, from nematodes and different insects and disease. We're trying to do our best to be the best stewards we can of what we have.
That makes perfect sense. We just built a new farmers market pavilion here in Thomaston. To me, that seems like a really positive investment in both agriculture and community life. Do you have any opinion about what that means to see your own town creating a space that supports local farmers and brings people together?
I believe it's a great thing. Um, when you can do something to have a central localized spot for people to come sell fruits, vegetables, or whatever they have, it builds the community. And whether people want to realize it or not, we as human beings, we have to have clean water and we have to have food. Without those two things, we don't survive. And your farmers are doing their dead level best to protect the environment, to protect their homes, to protect the land, and to protect waters that flow through the land that go to whoever ends up with it down south of us or downstream. Um, it's no different than what was the old saying here years ago: buy local, stay local, support your local folks. Uh, Times are hard for everybody.
Hmm. I think you might have already answered this a little bit, but so how does the agricultural research at UGA affect what Georgia farmers plant, how crops are improved, and how research ultimately impacts the food that we have on our tables?
How much time you got?
As long as you need.
So, what amazed me, I started in 2006 with the University of Georgia. Like I said, I started with the variety testing program. As I've worked through the years, I've gotten to know several different plant breeders. Plant breeders to me are the people who, for the longest time, they've crossed plants. To me, that's still genetically modifying. It's just a slower way to genetically modify. They're looking at yields, number one. They're looking at straw strength or standability. They're looking at disease resistance. They're looking at insect resistance. They're looking at different traits that each plant possesses and tries to cross those to have the best plant they can. These plant breeders, to me, are just as significant as any of the biotech industry folks who are trying to combat the next big disease in human beings or animals. Um, our food supply depends on plant breeders. They're working to develop varieties that are resistant. Most people probably won't know, but we used to have a major issue with certain varieties with Asian soybean rust, and that was devastating to our soybean farmers across the United States, not just here in Georgia. Um, Stripe rust in wheat was devastating. These breeders have worked together, and not necessarily together as far as different crops, but they work together in their own area of emphasis. For instance, Dr. Bill Branch down in Tifton. The tomato spotted wilt virus I guess it started somewhere either in the late 70s, early 80s. Um, it might have been mid 80s. And it devastated our peanut crop here in Georgia. Georgia is the number one state for peanuts. We are known as the peanut state. I used to know all the statistics. There were 7 other states altogether that grew maybe 100,000 acres more than Georgia alone. Georgia mainly grows runners, uh, maybe a couple other different types, but the runner varieties are what they majorly grow. Bill Branch developed a variety called Georgia 06G. It's the major peanut grown in Georgia today. I can't tell you, I'd have to go out and look and do the research, but I can't tell you how many millions of dollars he saved farmers and the peanut industry from, peanut oil, peanut butter, whatever the case may be, uh, to help that industry survive. Without those breeders, it's going to be a tough. It's. I hear people all the time say, "Hey, we need heirloom varieties." Well, the problem with heirloom varieties is they just don't have the resistance to disease and insects that we need. You can still grow heirloom varieties. You just have to watch them like a hawk or an eagle to make sure that they don't get infested or whatever happens. Now you can save seed from heirloom varieties. Most of the varieties are hybrids grown now. Uh, they have genetic material which is patented, whether it be the Roundup Ready gene, but any of this intellectual material that's put together by these breeders is protected by those patents. And it can be anything from, a high yielding wheat or a high yielding soybean. I know now they have cotton that you can actually, that's resistant to 2,4-D, and they're still having some issues combating, off-target movement, which is a whole other thing we can talk about. But my point is, in the variety evaluation program, the variety evaluation program was set up to evaluate these varieties from breeders across the United States, whether they be public or private. And these folks pay entries into the program. I mean, that's how they make the money for the equipment they purchase, for harvesting, for measuring moisture and all this kind of stuff. But for a variety to be released, it has to go through the variety testing program 3 years straight and show a positive projection, either through yield or some type of resistance, for it to be able to produce, be released to the market and be released for sale. So there's different, I guess, protocols set forth to protect the breeder, protect the industry, protect the farmers, to make sure that they're purchasing a variety that's going to be adaptive for their different environment. The statewide variety testing program tests, I think it's 8 different locations across the state, from North Georgia to almost to the Florida line. They also cooperate with the University of Florida, Auburn University, and certain other colleges close by as a regional effort to evaluate varieties that may be adaptive for those areas as well. So the university is doing, the College of Ag and University, we're doing our best to provide material that's going to help make it easier for the farmer, because the toughest decision we make as farmers is which variety we're going to choose to plant. If we have everything else perfect, from soil moisture to fertility, we get the perfect rains. If we select a variety that's not adaptive for our area, we're not going to be successful. We're going to fail. So what I've done over the last 20 years is, I've done well. I've been successful. I enjoy it. It's a lot of long hours, hot days, hard work, but it's not necessarily just for me. I do it for the extension specialists who go out there and make recommendations on certain varieties. I do it for the extension agents so they can have information to provide to their local farmers and extension people. I do it for the farmers. who needs somebody who's doing this work, who actually cares to make sure that it's done a certain way that they can be successful. It's not something that's publicized a lot, and it's okay. It's not something we want, prizes or awards for. We do it because, one, we enjoy what we do, but two, I guess the success is spread across so many that it just, I don't know, it brings happiness to us, joy to us. It's good to see.
Well, farmers often know the land better than anybody. I would like to ask two things. What has nature taught you? And what would happen if local farmers disappeared?
Oh boy. So I don't know. Just growing up in the country was a blessing.
Hmm.
Um, you think about back when you were a kid, and Travis Street had a couple of country songs, and
Uh-huh.
you could lay outside in the grass, or most of us, I think, had a trampoline. You could look up at the stars at night, and you see the moon, shooting stars, and try to figure out what constellations were out there. There's a peace and tranquility that you can't find anywhere else. Now, it's not for everybody, but some people, I guess, say they get lonely. I don't feel the loneliness out there. There's so much out there that, between the cicadas, the crickets at night, the frogs, coyotes, whatever else you can think of, that, you know, I guess, you're just part of the universe and part of the farm, part of the country. Um, Growing up on a farm and working in the agriculture industry probably has taught me more about being humble and humility than anything else. When I used to work with horses and train horses, as back before I had a youngin, they can't talk per se as what we're talking, but they can let you know by the way their ears, if they're forward or backwards. If you start seeing teeth, or you can feel the tension in their back. If you'll listen and actually listen, you can hear what's being told to you. If farmers disappear, number one, I don't know where our food's going to come from.
Hmm.
It amazes me how much flack we get for genetically modified organisms or GMO crops. But yet now somebody's coming up with lab grown meat and everybody's A-OK with it. It baffles me about the human race and how, I guess, short our attention span is, or our memories are, about a lot of things. Um, so I'm not sure where it would all end. I guess the question is each individual out there ready to have a garden of their own? Are you ready to put in the work, the sweat equity, the blood and the tears? Because if you do away with farmers, that's what's going to happen.
Exactly. What kind of legacy do farmers now leave behind for future generations? Probably what you just said.
That's partly true. It's so for most farmers, there's nothing even close that compared to being raised on a farm. Um, I think back about when we were raised. It's not that long ago, even though we're 50. But our dad didn't have the large equipment, didn't have big batwing mowers, but we were doing our best to maintain 120 acres. And by the end of the summer, we were just finishing up. But it was really time to start over with the equipment we had. One, for him, I think it was a way to keep us out of trouble, and I think he did a great job keeping us out of trouble. He kept us busy. Um, he kept us being from idle. Idleness is probably one of the biggest things that I can see that's a major problem for anybody. I don't like being idle. That's why I work all the time. I come home, I garden, uh, farm, cut hay, bale hay, work with cows. If you got time, you can go fishing and hunting.
Mhm.
But idle time's not a good thing. Um,
So, when people sit down at their dinner tables, if they still sit down at dinner tables anymore, whether it's at home or a restaurant, what would you want them to remember about the people who made the meal possible?
for the most part, it's not just a job. It's how most people feel about the career. It's a way of life, and they're not really wanting anything different. They you can think about how history has affected the farms. Um, the people who farm, I truly believe, are the ones who are meant to farm. It's just like teachers. My mom, my sister's a teacher. The people who teach, who truly teach, and can reach people who need to be reached, they're where they're meant to be. Be thankful for those who are willing to be out in the sun and sweat and deal with the hurricanes and the torrential rains and the hailstorms. And because if you think about it, in agriculture, a farmer's got, I don't know, you could easily be depressed and think about all the things that are dead set against you, from mankind, humankind, to insect pests, disease, the weather, and even people. There's certain people that don't, I guess they believe we shouldn't be farming. We shouldn't have cows. We shouldn't have grow row crops. We ought to be able to just grow it all in a lab and live happily ever after. And that to me is not much of a life. But be thankful that there's somebody out there willing to put in the time and the effort to grow what is nutritional and what people like to eat or love to eat.
If there's one thing you could tell people that you would like for them to remember or know about a farmer, what is it?
That's a great question. I think, let me look at it this way. When we were in elementary school, it sure seemed like being a farmer was looked down upon. You can look at it several different ways. It's like I've tried to tell my son. I think most people don't really consider a career cleaning bathrooms as a career. And it's probably something that's looked down upon. But if you have a king or a queen living at the top and their bathroom ain't clean, who's not happy? The king and queen. There are jobs and careers that people do not want to do. But for the most part, you can find somebody who's willing and able, and hopefully, God willing, they enjoy what they do. It's not a glamorous life. It's not something we want to be rich and famous for. We just want to be able to farm. And for most of us, we just want to be left alone. We're not here to destroy the environment. We're not here to grow things that are going to harm people. It would just be nice every once in a while to have a little appreciation for it.
I'm sure. I think it's important for us to remember that every meal, every harvest, every season carries the fingerprints of people willing to work against uncertainty so the rest of us can live our daily lives. And I think understanding farmers means understanding something essential about community, sacrifice, and gratitude. I thank you so much for talking to us today. I've learned an awful lot. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank y'all for having me.